Hello there, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, wherever you're watching this. I hope you've had a wonderful Christmas because I am filming this in the lull between Christmas and New Year where you have no idea what day it is and it's great. And today I'm going to do a video which is very exciting for me because I have watched these every year since I was like 10 and I've never done one of my own and now I'm gonna. And it is talking about my favourite books of 2022. I love watching these videos so much because I get so many good recommendations from them because obviously they're books that people love and there's nothing I love more than talking about books I love, so we're gonna crack on with that. I am not including rereads in this because if I included rereads every year my favourite book would be The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and we can't be having that, so my top 10 books don't include rereads. But saying that, that doesn't mean that like some of these books are gonna be, I'm gonna reread them and I won't be able to include them in years time because I love them that much. But yes, I managed to get down to a top 10. I thought it was going to be really hard to actually like rank them, but actually it came pretty naturally when I was ranking them. So without further ado, we will crack on with number 10, which is The Stand by Stephen King. This is my dad's copy, hence it looks like it's been murdered. This is a very well read book in our house because it's my dad's favourite book of all time. I read this in one day during my 30 books in 30 days challenge. So there's a TikTok of me doing it. I think I've uploaded it to YouTube as well. I loved this so much. Reading this was like a fever dream because I was like sleep deprived reading it all at once, and I think that was the best way I could have read it because the book itself is a fever dream. The characters are so distinct and fleshed out, and probably the main reason I enjoyed this book so much because the plot was very intricate and well thought out to begin with. The ending, I've learnt now that Stephen King's endings, especially of his big books, because I read 11/22/63 as well and I found the same thing with that. I loved it up until the end was just not the most shining spectacular thing, but it didn't take away from how much I loved the characters in this book, how much I loved the tension, and I just want to read it again already. Because I feel like that even if I read it again, there'll be so many things I didn't notice like the first time. And it makes me want to read more Stephen King. So I think that is going to be a goal for 2023, is read and collect more Stephen King because I need to buy my own copy of this because look at the state of this. Book number 9 is one that there are 3 copies of in our house because I have one, my mum has one, and my sister now has one. And that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I read The Goldfinch a while ago and loved it. And I thought I would love this too because it's dark academia. The origin of dark academia practically. I've seen so many people love this and let me tell you, they were not wrong. It's so crazy, it's almost feral, and like your overriding reaction is just eat the rich. I think that's my Goodreads review on it, is just eat the rich. But it is so good. It's so haunting and tense and every single character is incredibly morally dubious. And you feel awful for liking any of them, and by the end of it you don't really like any of them. But it sort of follows them through their whole lives as they meet in like a classics class at university, and things ensue, bad things ensue because they are bad people. And what I like the most about it is that Donna Tartt doesn't try to redeem them in any way. She's just like, you know what, I want to write a book about morally awful rich people, and she did that. She accomplished that, and I had a brilliant time reading this. I think this is going to be the most fun book to annotate because there's so many beautiful literary references and references to the classics and to Greek philosophy and mythology, and it was gorgeous. I loved it. Number 8 I still don't have a copy of because it's so expensive on Amazon for a hardcover and I can't justify it even though it was one of my favourite books I read, and that is Finding Her Edge by Jennifer Jacopelli. So everyone knows how much I loved Break the Fall, which is like a gymnastics book, but this one was about figure skating, and when I found out that Jennifer Jacopelli had written a figure skating book, I could have cried with happiness because the way she writes sports is so accurate. She does so much good research into them that they feel incredibly organic, and like she knows what she's talking about, which is just the only thing you can ask for when you're reading a sports book, especially someone like me who has a special interest in gymnastics and figure skating. But this one follows our main character who's an ice dancer. Her sister is like a single skater who is much more famous than she is and gets all the accolade because their parents were figure skaters too, and it follows her as she embarks on a fake relationship with her skating partner, her new skating partner, and follows their season. And I loved it so much. I loved every character getting there just deserves. That's my favourite kind of book. And it was a love triangle that genuinely, it felt like she could have ended up with either person. And the only other love triangle I've read of that has been Cassandra Clare. But this one was actually a well-written love triangle, which I feel is very rare. They are tried so often, but very rarely accomplished well. But this one was, I promise. And also, like, bonus points because that one of the characters skates to is a Taylor Swift skating program, and I have waited my whole life for one of them. So if someone can do that in real life. And Jennifer Jacopelli also saw my TikTok where I read it in one afternoon, and it made my whole life. I was so happy. Number 7 is another one I read in my 30 books in 30 days challenge, and another one of my favourite authors of all time, which is Nina LaCour. Everyone knows I love Nina LaCour so much. She's a beautiful sapphic writer who writes the most lyrical, mystical, beautiful books I've ever read. And this is another one. This is Watch Over Me, which deals with trauma and loneliness, and we sort of go to this, like, almost an orphanage, but it's like a farm where, like, all these kids live who have gone through shit, basically, and it's about them coping with it, and the older ones look after the younger ones. And this is about our main character who forms a really close relationship with one of her younger ones. It is so beautifully poetic. It made me bawl my eyes out. I've never come across an author who writes sadness and loneliness in a way that resonates so strongly in my brain, and just the words she crafts are just magnificent. Everyone needs to read a Nina LaCour book in their lifetime. They are so fantastic. It's such a quiet, understated, beautiful novel that is one of those ones you know will never blow up on BookTok, because it doesn't have those, like, tropey things. It doesn't have that sort of, like, dialogue that's crafted to go viral, which a lot of books that I've read that are, like, new releases have, because that's sort of the way the publishing industry is going. But that's a whole other discussion we can have another time. But this is almost the direct antithesis of that, and I think you should read it just for that, because it's so beautiful and I love it so much. What are we on? What's this? This is 6. Number 6 is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, another one I read in my 30 books in 30 days. I can tell you exactly where I was when I read this. I can tell you the emotions. I can tell you almost minute by minute how I read it, because I attach experiences to the books I read, especially the books I love, and I loved this so much. It was the most hard-hitting book I've ever read, because it felt like reading my own experiences in a book, which obviously you read a lot of the time, like people like own voices, sapphic books. I find quite a lot of myself in them, but this was like Sylvia Plath I hadn't read this as I'd gone through my own mental health journey, put it that way, and it was like she'd had exactly the same journey as I am, which again, aware how it ends, so let's not go there. But this to me is like a work of art. I think it's absolutely stunning, although actually a lot of it is, yeah, because I've now bought Sylvia Plath's poetry and her journals, and so much of this is like autobiographic, and yeah, it's a lot to read, but it is so wonderfully fantastic, and I love it so much. Let's move on to number 5. We are in the top half of the books I read in 2022, and number 5 is Olivia by Dorothy Strecky. This was part of the readathon I did that disappeared into the computer ether because I accidentally deleted the entire vlog, but it was wonderful. This is so beautifully melodramatic and romantic, and it's wonderfully French. It's set in a Parisian, like, boarding finishing school, and our main character Olivia goes there and forms these very intense relationship with her, I guess, teacher, not really a teacher, but Mademoiselle Julie, who herself has a very intense relationship with someone else, and it's such a beautiful juxtaposition of just the most delicate thing you've ever read and just something that feels like it's hit you in the face with its intensity and its passion. And as someone with various mother issues who is obsessive about middle-aged women, let's just say I felt this in my soul. And like many lesbian works at the time, it does not end happily, put it that way. And this one made me cry as well. I think about this all the time. I honestly do, because whenever I'm experiencing those same emotions, I'm like, you know what, now would be a good time to reread Olivia. Soon I will. But yeah, this is, if you have ever been that girl with the obsession with your English teacher, You need to read this. Okay, so number 4, we are moving along very swift. A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee, which I have very recently read on my channel as part of the 24-hour readathon that did end up getting uploaded. But this I didn't realise was gay. Fantastic. Yeah, there's a relationship between, a very intense and toxic relationship, mind you, between our 2 female main characters in this, and it's set in an American school, and it's incredibly witchy and dark academia, and I love it so much. This was nothing like I expected, and yet everything like I expected as well. It's as supernatural and possessive in its writing as it is in its plot. It's incredibly character driven. The pacing was a little bit off because it was so slow paced, which I found wonderful. I loved the sort of first 2/3 of this as a character study, as a study on loneliness, on growing up and going to school and trauma and all of these wonderful things. Well, I'm not saying trauma is wonderful, but you know, it dealt with them in incredible ways. And then it became quite plot driven and I wasn't too keen on that, but because I loved how she'd written these characters so much, I felt such deep feelings for them, including hatred, because oh my god, did I hate Ellis. And there's someone I pictured her as, and I can't say who, but oh my god, it was perfect. Ellis is like a character that I could imagine being in The Secret History. Like, that's Ellis, and I can see, you can see the influences of that in this book, which I love when you can see influences from other literature. But yeah, this was so good, and I'm so glad I finally read it because I've been thinking about reading it for so long, and I finally got around to it, and it was so wonderful. So we're up to the top 3, which the top 3 were a no-brainer. I didn't even have to think about how much I loved these top 3 books, and this one you'll kind of be a little bit shocked at because this is probably the first year in a while that a Taylor Jenkins Reid book has not been number 1. It's number 3. This is Carrie Soto is Back, which follows Carrie Soto, who we met in Malibu Rising, who has an affair with Nina's husband. That's how we know her, and this follows her and her journey in tennis, which I am a tennis geek. Andy Murray, I love you, my emotional support white man. But that's a completely other. This delves really wonderfully into femininity in sport and being a woman in sport, particularly Back, because it follows through 70s, well, 80s, 90s. It follows Carrie's entire life, and as she seeks to retain her status as the most successful female tennis player. Again, my love of Taylor Jenkins Reid is that she goes so in depth in her research that it feels so organic. Reading about the tennis, I was like, this is what happened in real life tennis, even though it didn't, but I was like, this is what happened, this is real life. And like, so many people read Evelyn Hugo and they're like, Evelyn Hugo is not a real person, but that's how I felt. I got to see DJR speak about this at the Cheltenham Literature Festival, which was where I met Adriana and Lana, and they were so sweet, and I love you guys so much. But yeah, it was so beautiful to hear her talk about her writing process and how this book came to be. And like every Taylor Jenkins Reid book, it made me cry. It's got the most intense characters you can imagine, and you feel so connected to them. And it was just really great to read just an ambitious, bossy female character who had no reserves about being that either, and I loved that. I absolutely loved that, so that's why this book is one of my favourites of the year. Then I never thought a book would be better than, I would find more enjoyable than a Taylor Jenkins Reid book, but this year I loved 2 books even more than that, and I love that book a lot. So number 2, the runner-up in Meg's 2022 Goodreads challenge, if it was like that, is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This book I feel like is like Marmite. So many people hated it, but loads of people love it. I am very much one that loved it. I went through this and I was like, sort of, I didn't annotate it, but I did underline like some of my favourite passages. This book is deliciously mind-boggling. You really have no idea what's going on half the time, but it's so wonderfully poetic and lyrical that, quite frankly, I didn't care. The world is so real and visceral, even though it's so strange and dreamlike, that it's like you can touch it, you can taste it. Erin Morgenstern's writing is so... I've never read anything like it, and I love it. I've heard that Laini Taylor's writing is supposed to be quite similar, so I'm hoping it is, because I love this so much, and I can't wait to read The Night Circus, because I want all of the Erin Morgenstern books. I have a feeling she's going to become one of my favourite authors. It's a book all about books, and there's nothing you can give me that is more beautiful than that. Number 2, loved it. But my favourite book of this year, undisputed favourite book of this year, from the second I read the first chapter, was Mistakes Were Made by Merrell Wilson. Merrell Wilson wrote Something to Talk About, which is another book I absolutely adore. This one, I can't put into words how much I love this book. It is so unashamedly me, and it made me feel so unashamed about who I am attracted to and my sexuality, but also my deep love of older women, as we've established by my love of Olivia. But this is a romance that takes place between our main character and her best friend, or her roommate's mum. My favourite thing about Merrell Wilson books is they're wonderfully slow burn, but at no point is there any like cataclysmic random argument and breakup that you get in romance novels. There's none of that. It is just a happy sailing book that eventually resolves itself, and it is so good. The chemistry was off the scale. It was so intense, and gives me shivers thinking about it. I can't stop smiling thinking about this book because I love it so much. Oh, I love it. It's like almost marketed as like forbidden love, but at no point is anyone ashamed of this, like of their love for each other in this book. There is no embarrassment, and I loved it so much. It made me feel so comfortable reading it, and that's like my favourite thing. It's like the only way I can describe my experience reading this book is like when you've been out in the cold and then you like get into a warm bath, and you know that like tingling feeling you get in your feet. That's how it felt to read this book to me. I could read this 100 more times and it would still be my favourite. I absolutely adore it. It just captures sapphic longing and mummy issues so wonderfully. Merrell Wilson, will you marry me please? And it also did make me absolutely desperate for a middle-aged woman to like sweep me off my feet and love me, which please, I'm begging someone, some hot over 40 woman, please come to me. I am waiting. But anyway, this is my favourite book of the year. Hands down, I love it. I want everyone to read it. I will bash people over the head with it until they read it because it's so good. So those are my favourite books of 2022. I hope you found maybe a new book recommendation. And if you did, let me know. If you've read any of these books, let me know, because I want to obsess over them with people. And let me know what your favourites were of 2022, because I need more book recommendations as well. It's not like I have enough to read. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.